Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the MiVoice Connect route points. So, to start with, what exactly is a route point? Well, route points are basically, you can call them extensions or virtual extensions within the MIVC system that allows you to direct incoming or inbound traffic to some other destination that is not the Connect platform itself. You can kind of think about or refer to the idea of, say, a traffic sign or a turn signal on a roadway as being sort of analogous to a route point. The basic idea is that calls that would come into My Voice Connect would hit the route point, and then the route point is set up and configured to direct that traffic to a different location. And when I say a different location, I mean it could go to some kind of internal server. For example, maybe a enterprise contact center or a my contact center. Alternatively, you could also send it to maybe a conferencing server or even the newer My Contact Center for Business or MCX platforms. The other time that a route point is used is if you need to direct a call that has come in to an external number. Think about something like a after hours answering service, for example. So, before we kind of dive into the specific configuration for a route point, there is one piece of logic or flow that I did want to quickly cover off, and that's what we're looking at here. So notice that even though this looks pretty complicated in terms of what's going on, anytime a call comes in and engages with a route point of some kind, only one of the bottom four choices is going to be made. And each of these individual choices are all going to basically terminate to a shared set of destinations. So we can see with this particular flow, we do have our route point connected into a DID number or a DNS match. So that inbound number would come in, it would hit the route point, and then depending on the route point's configuration and specifically whether there are any schedules that are being used, that will determine obviously, which schedule is going to be applied, and in turn, which destination is going to be engaged based on that selected schedule. So again, even though this looks pretty complicated, when a call initially comes in through the DID or the DNS match, it'll hit the route point, and then depending on which schedule, custom, holiday, on hours, or off hours, only one of those conditions is going to match at one time, and each of those individual schedules are going to be pointed to sort of the same list or the same type of destinations, whether that's an external number, whether we're going to the enterprise contact center IRN, whether we're going to some other internal destination, perhaps for conferencing. Again, the overall flow here, call comes in, goes to the route point based on the schedule, if one exists. Whichever schedule is chosen, it'll go to the particular destination defined within that schedule. Now, when I initially started the description, I sort of described a route point as basically a extension. And if we begin looking at some of the configuration for the route point, you will notice that basically a lot of this configuration is very, very similar to an actual extension that you would create. You still have to assign a name, you have to give obviously you have to give an extension number to a route point, and then again, most of the details that you will see here are going to be very similar to what we would create for an actual user's extension. You can see that we can enable DID. You can see that we can include the route point in the DA by name directory. So a lot of this configuration, if you're familiar with how to create a user, will be very, very similar or well known to you when you create a route point. Now, there are a couple of pieces of configuration that I do want to highlight in particular for the route point, and that is the server and the mailbox. So In general, when a route point is created, it is going to live on whether it's a headquarter server or a DVS or an LDVS. These route points are basically managed by the server, so they are a server specific call control feature, if you will. One point in particular that is important is if you have a older contact center product, again, specifically we're talking here about enterprise contact center or my contact center. In cases where are going to use this route point specifically for the ECC, you need to ensure that you are setting the server flag for that route point to be connected to the contact center, not to either the headquarters server or the DVS, whether it's a Windows or a Linux DVS. It's really important to set it up that way because that's how the overall design and architecture works for calls that are going to go into the ECC or the My Contact Center platform or products. Now, sort of similarly, if you were going to be directing or using this route point to send calls into, say, the MCX or the My Contact Center for Business, in that case, the route point behaves sort of normally, which is to say that you will attach it to either the headquarters server or the DVS where appropriate. So that server selection for most implementations will be assigned to a specific server, headquarters or DVS, when you are dealing specifically with the enterprise contact center product or the My Contact Center product. These are specific exceptions to the normal association that a route point will have. Now, the other point that I did want to briefly mention was that depending on the sort of expected design and flow for your calls is going to basically inform whether you're going to use a mailbox for the route point or not. Generally speaking, if the destination that the route point is going to be pointed to is going to be some internal type of device or service or server, again, like a contact center, generally speaking, you do not want to have a mailbox enabled for the route point. And the reason for that is the control of that call is basically going to be handled by the internal device or the internal server, whatever that might be. On the flip side, if the route point is going to direct calls outside of the enterprise's network, in cases like that, it might make more sense to have a mailbox attached to the route point. Because depending on the specific flow that you have in mind, you may want to have, if that external number for whatever reason doesn't answer or isn't able to pick up, you still want to control where that voicemail is going to be left. And because there's a voicemail box associated with the route point, having it saved to a internal location, specifically the route point's mailbox, might make more sense. Once again, when it comes to whether the mailbox is enabled or not, it's all going to come down to what is the expected call flow, what is the expected design. And generally speaking, calls that are routed external to the enterprise will likely have a mailbox enabled. It's not a requirement, but it's likely to be that way. And if the route point is directed to another internal destination, another contact center, or a conferencing server, in those cases, it might make more sense to have the mailbox disabled. Okay, so the last bit of configuration that we're going to look at for the route points is actually, well, the routing. Now, in our example here, we're just simply creating and setting up the on hours destination for a route point. And the configuration that you see here is going to be nearly identical for off hours, holiday, or custom schedules. And it all comes down to basically setting up the same thing. Do you want calls to be forwarded only when there's no answer or it's busy? Do you want calls to be forwarded to this particular destination always? You basically set up the call forwarding destination to be wherever you want that inbound call that has hit the route point, you set your call forward destination to wherever you want to route that call to. Generally speaking, we would expect to have the call forward setting set to always. And then in our always destination, we would define wherever we would want that call to actually go, whether it's another extension on the system, whether it's an external number, whatever the case is, the always field would be filled out with our destination. We'd save that up, and then as appropriate, we would go into our off-hour schedule, our holiday, and our custom schedules and set those values where they're needed. So, when it comes to the process of a route point, the basic idea is that a route point is a virtual extension that is primarily used as, shall we say, a traffic sign or a turn signal that routes inbound traffic from within the MiVoice Connect platform to some other destination, whether that's an internal destination, as is the case with contact center platforms, or an external destination, like, for example, an after hours answering service. It is important to note that the routing for a route point is controlled on sort of a scheduled type configuration where you have your on hours destination, off hours, holiday destination, and then a custom schedule if you wish to implement it. But it is important to understand that if you do want calls to route differently based on your different schedules, you obviously have to set up that configuration as necessary. And then finally, the last major key point is that when a route point is set up, you need to be very mindful of whether or not the route point is going to require a mailbox. Generally speaking, for internal destinations, mailboxes shouldn't be required or shouldn't be used. But for external destinations, a mailbox might be useful in that sort of scenario or situation. I'd like to thank everybody for watching our video. If you haven't seen any of our previous videos on this channel, go ahead and check some of those out. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.